Mike Tomlin is out in Pittsburgh, and that's good for Mike Tomlin, but it's bad news for the Steelers. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, The Brain, Luke Braun. On today's episode, we are going to rank the head coach openings in the NFL from best to worst and talk about who would be the best fit for each opening. But we got to start with a brand new opening as the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin officially agreed to part ways. Tomlin is stepping down, however you want to talk about it. But either way, that's good news for Mike Tomlin to get a little bit of a break. But it is bad news for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they are not one of the top openings on the market. Before we dive in, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Well, Luke, after the game on Monday night, I said that the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to move on from Mike Tomlin. They needed some sort of change, but it sounds like it was Tomlin who truly needed to move on from the situation. He, quote unquote, steps down. And just so everybody understands, Mike Tomlin did not get fired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Technically speaking, like we saw with Sean Payton in the New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers still hold the rights of Mike Tomlin's coach contract. So he cannot go get a job elsewhere. The prevailing thought right now is that Mike Tomlin is going to take a year out of football. He's going to go do TV for a little bit and then come back next year with the opportunity to be traded to a new team. Now, there is the possibility that he could still be traded now and jump right back into coaching, but that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Luke, if you were Mike Tomlin, would you go ahead and, after so many years of coaching with Pittsburgh, go ahead and take that break, take that TV opportunity like Sean Payton? Or if you're Tomlin, do you think you want to jump right back in and try to get somewhere else?
And that's a very personal call. It's really hard to get into somebody else's mind, right? If I did it for 20 years, I mean, look, are you burnt out on it? Do you need the break? Because if you need the break, yeah, go insult Terry Bradshaw a whole bunch on Fox, and you're going to be super happy about that. Like, hey, get paid millions of dollars to like hurl jabs at Rob Gronkowski. Sure, man, go do that. But these guys live and breathe coaching so much that, like Sean Payton, they come back and they miss it and they say, I got to get back into this. Maybe the sabbatical is just good for you mentally, or if you're just like, no, I just needed to be out of that. I just needed a change of scenery. It was time. It was the end of an era. We couldn't get past the hump in the playoffs. Like, then maybe you want to do something else. To me, it's a little bit like throwing your old organization a bone. Like, hey, we're heading to this divorce, but there's no hard feelings. Keep my rights and get a draft pick for me whenever I do come back. Feels a little bit like it's like as amicable could be.
Literally the exact word that I was going to use is amicable. It's about as clean of a break as they could possibly have. Now, on the other side of this, we're going to rank head coaching positions and which ones we think are the best in the NFL. And obviously there's some differences in our list here, but I don't know about you, Luke. I would not have the Pittsburgh Steelers too high in this situation. You look, their quarterback situation is totally uncertain. Would you want to bring Aaron Rodgers back even? Is that even appetizing for a coach? They don't have a true path with being a playoff team once again to get a top quarterback in the NFL draft. A lot of the good pieces on their roster are older pieces like a Cam Hayward, a TJ Watt, a Jalen Ramsey. DK Metcalf is a good player, but is he truly worth the money that they paid him in the offseason? Like, wouldn't you rather have George Pickens right now if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers? Isn't he the more valuable player in the NFL right now? He just had a better season than DK Metcalf. There are a lot of questions in Pittsburgh, and although the organization is top tier, top 2, top 1 organization in the NFL's history, that comes with a lot of expectations when you're following a guy like Mike Tomlin. I think that would be a tough act to follow, as they would say.
There is a Dan Hansis-ism from the old Around the NFL podcast. You never want to be the guy after the guy. And that's the worry. But Mike Tomlin was the guy after Bill Cowher.
True.
So sometimes it can work. And I think the Steelers may be the exception to that rule. I have a different pitch with the Steelers. I think it does look nice because you're not tied down to anything if you take over in Pittsburgh. You get to pick your quarterback and you get years and years to do it. You don't have to do it now. You can pick a guy who's a sophomore in college right now that you really like, which is what Brandon Beane did in Buffalo. He was targeting Josh Allen well before Josh Allen came out. Same with like Ryan Poles in Chicago. And I would imagine that giving the head coach a little bit of say in the personnel and the quarterback is not something that the Steelers ownership is opposed to like at all. So I feel like if you want a head coaching job, this is one where you know you're going to get a really long leash. You're going to get a lot of time to build the team exactly the way you want. Nothing is tied down. Everybody in there in 3 years is not going to be on the Steelers anymore. They're either going to be retired or cut for cap space or whatever. You get to build this in your image with the patience that requires. It's a lot different than taking over, say, the Raiders, who need a rebuild, but there's no patience there anymore. The Browns, you need a rebuild, but there's no patience. You're just going to lame duck it unless you can fix this right now. And let's be honest. I think the Steelers present an unorthodox but really attractive opportunity.
That's interesting. Well, as we get into how we would rank things, you may be higher on the Steelers opportunity than I am, but I think neither of us would have the Steelers at number 1 overall, correct?
No, but
okay. Okay. Well, that is interesting. See, for me, the number 1 job opening right now is by far the Baltimore Ravens. And what's interesting about the Ravens is that I think the number 1 candidate on the market is the guy that they just let go in John Harbaugh. So it's like, where do you go from here? But our guys over at Locked On Ravens, including Kevin Ostreicher, our host, talked about what exactly the Ravens are looking for.
How do you like the Ravens list of names so far? Is there any underrated name that you like? Is there anybody that you do not want anywhere near Baltimore in terms of this head coaching opportunity? How do you feel about the process so far?
Well, they're casting a wide net. And so right now it is, I like it because they did the same thing in 2008. Right now, you need a confident head coach who's going to come in and change the culture of the locker room, rewrite the ship, if you will, kind of do some damage control and shift things around quickly. That's a lot to ask of a first-year head coach who doesn't have any experience leading men in this magnitude. So I would want a guy with experience, but I'm okay with it. I think Steve Bisciotti, Eric DeCosta, I trust those guys to make a decision that's going to be best for the football team.
I just don't think that they have a lot of good answers, and a name that I think could make sense for the Ravens, honestly, is the name that I think makes the most sense for the Steelers, and it's what we talked about before we came on air here, and it's Brian Flores. I think he would be a great fit for both of those physical AFC North teams.
Yeah, so I actually had Kevin on my show to talk about the possibility of Brian Flores going to the Raiders, and what he told me was
Ravens,
that like the two hurdles here are, I don't know how Steve Bisciotti feels about the lawsuit and kind of ruffling feathers in that way. And he was a little concerned about that, but also Brian Flores's relationship to his quarterback was such a big thing in Miami with Tua. What happens with Lamar Jackson? Is that the guy you want to shepherd your, two-time MVP, ridiculous quarterback into the promised land? But boy, sure would solve the defensive issues they have. And Brian Flores with Kyle Hamilton in his hands is something that scares the absolute bejesus out of me.
I mean, he deserves the opportunity. We could talk about the lawsuit and how the boys club feels about that and everything.
Unfortunately, our opinion on that does not matter.
It does not, but I'm sorry. It is clear that there may not be a more deserving defensive coach in the NFL to get a head coaching job again than Brian Flores. I think that would make a ton of sense. You had another good option that might make sense for the Steelers as well, correct?
Well, yeah. So Chris Shula is a name that has come up in a lot of these.
Rams defensive coordinator.
Yeah, the Rams defensive coordinator. And that is... I know people are going to be a little spooked with like Brandon Staley, but this is not like an Aaron Donald Merchant situation. That is a ragtag group of either young players that, look, I love Jared Verse and Fiske and all those guys, but either young players that are well coached now, and that reflects well on the defensive coordinator, or just a bunch of guys. Like, I don't think that Rams secondary, like, that's not made out of names. Not the way it was in 2021, where it was superstars all over the place. They have really gotten a lot out of like Cam Curl and
Emmanuel Forbes was left for dead as a first-round bust, and they turned him into a good player. Nate Landman all of a sudden was, I mean, the Landman.
The Landman, right. It's very impressive kind of how much blood they've squeezed out of a stone in LA. And the thing about it, and I don't know this about Chris Shula, but the thing about it is, how is he as a leader and stuff? It's going to matter a lot to Baltimore and Pittsburgh, that both want to hire a guy that they're going to have for 2 decades again. And I don't know what that is, but what I will say is this is something Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams, told me when the Vikings hired Kevin O'Connell, and I got to talk to her about it. The Sean McVay stamp of approval, like that guy has the best intuition in the league for who has the goods. And that's why so many of these McVay drones are out there in the league and still doing well, like LaFleur, et cetera. Because if Sean McVay realizes that you have the goods as a coach, everybody understands that Sean McVay is never wrong about that. It's not that everything he touches turns to gold. It's that he knows how to find the guys. And I feel like that endorsement is worth something to me.
No, I 100% agree. But I think these two jobs are definitely different. I definitely have the Ravens over the Steelers. They have a better roster than the Steelers. They're both great organizations, but the quarterback advantage with Baltimore, obviously. The problem is the expectations are high at both places, and these are two franchises that typically are patient, but will they be as patient after that patience is kind of expired with these two guys? That'll be something interesting to see play out over the next few years. But outside the Ravens, who is the next best job? Obviously, Luke has mentioned the Steelers, but I think the next best job might honestly be the New York Giants. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gusto. Let's be real, no one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets, except our folks over at Gusto, because that's where Gusto comes in. They're going to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is an all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, like a lot of these NFL teams that we're talking about, onboarding, like they're about to do pretty soon, or paying employees, which they're going to have to pony up as well, Gusto is going to help you do all of that from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. And knowing that you can reach a certified HR expert anytime really gives you peace of mind. Make sure that you try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 free months when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time. That's gusto.com/LockedOnNFL.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We're going to rank our head coach openings. We talked about the Tomlin news. The Steelers are a new opening on the market. We talked about the Ravens being the #1 opening for both of us, but now is where the drama really begins. For me, Luke, the next couple of teams here are the John Harbaugh teams. It's the New York Giants and then the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm looking at the New York Giants, and I really do believe that that is the spot for John Harbaugh, and our folks over at Locked On Giants think that makes a lot of sense too.
And I think the Giants are, right at the top of the list. If they're not #1, then they're 1A. And the meetings that take place this week, could determine, his ultimate decision. I mean, he's really in a unique position. I can't remember in all the years I've covered the NFL, one candidate being in such demand by so many teams. But that just is a tribute to who John is as a person and is a very accomplished coach. And I give the Giants a really good chance to be the team that he picks.
I think that is the team that John Harbaugh is going to pick, and it makes sense because in my mind, the best opening is the Ravens. Obviously, Harbaugh's not getting hired by them after being fired, but the Giants are the second best one, in my opinion. They have a really good roster. I think like Jacksonville or New England, more Jacksonville than New England. I think Vrabel added some pieces in there to help himself out, but like Jacksonville, the Giants are a roster that's ready to go. They have a number one left tackle. They have a number one wide receiver if Neighbors comes back healthy, which he was still like on a cane a couple of weeks ago in the locker room, so I guess there's no guarantee there, but I have faith that a young guy like Neighbors will be back. What they have on the defensive line, some of the talent in the secondary, you got a young quarterback in Jackson Dart, who some coaches might view as the best of the young quarterbacks that are available to coach for right now. Obviously, you have to deal with the New York media, the pressure of the market, and Joe Shane, do you really want him to, a lame duck GM, to be your guy, but you could just pick your own guy maybe the year after that if you're John Harbaugh? I think Harbaugh and the Giants are a perfect fit, and I think the Giants are the second best opening available.
Yeah, feels it's like a honeypot a little bit because there is a lot of stuff going for this for this opening, especially if you really like Jackson Dart. If you think Jackson Dart is going to be a dude and you're good to go, take that job. Bam, you got your quarterback in place. You're super
and
happy.
A good roster. Yeah,
it feels a little bit like Ryan Poles taking the Bears job and being like, Justin Fields is my guy. Like, when what we didn't know is that he had different plans in mind, anyways. But that's a pretty good way to get like Eberflus if things aren't in sync, right? Yeah. And is the GM is not in sync with you, you're not in sync with the quarterback, and so there's already like baggage from that you're picking up, like the injury history now with Jackson Dart, something you have to manage and be pretty fearful of. That I think so. I'm not as high on the Giants as you are as an opening. But it's mostly because there is this very common path that teams go down with, young quarterback, new coach. He doesn't take the step you think he took. The GM gets fired, and now you're in chaos. Yeah. That like it could be pretty easy to end up a lame duck,
Yeah, I think that definitely is possible. There is downside with that as well, but I think there's some real downside with a lot of these openings outside of like the Baltimore Ravens, and that's why the next one for me would be the Atlanta Falcons, and it's kind of a similar story. I think the Falcons have an even better roster right now than the New York Giants do. The problem is, and they're in a division that I think is excessively winnable in the NFC South. Like, there are no juggernauts there. But the problem is, what are you going to do with Michael Penix and his injury? And are you going to be able to bring in a veteran quarterback that you can win with right away? Because the appeal of the Giants and the Falcons is the roster is good enough where you can win right away. And if you're an older coach like Harbaugh, who's 63 years old, you know what I mean? Do you really want to be a part of a rebuild with like the Titans or the Raiders? No, you don't. You want to go in and be able to win right away and prove that the Ravens were wrong for letting you go. So I think the Falcons would actually be my next head coaching job because of their division, their great roster. They have an owner with deep pockets who's probably going to respect Harbaugh. The problem is, again, the quarterback situation. They don't have their first pick, but James Pierce Jr. looks like he was probably worth making that trade at this moment in time. Are you higher or lower on the Falcons than I am?
I'm also lower on the Falcons, but not by a ton. Because again, like there's a path here, kind of like the Steelers. You can look at the Falcons and say, hey, I really like Arch Manning, and I can probably manufacture a situation with whoever they hire as a GM with me. I can manufacture a situation where, we're going after that guy. And if you don't believe in Michael Penix and you're worried about the knees and stuff like that, like there is an off ramp to that. There's an off ramp to Kirk Cousins. Like they're not stuck in this anymore. Raheem Morris took the kind of hardest year of that right on the chin.
Yeah.
I think I just don't quite I have the Giants above the Falcons. And I only actually have one, the Steelers and one other team higher than the Giants than you do. Because, taking over with the young quarterback, if you like the young quarterback, great. You're super happy about that. But I feel like the Falcons have been steadily losing patience with their coaches. It's been shorter and shorter leashes.
Arthur Blank is getting older. That's the problem. Is he sees like, not to be morbid, but he's like, I'm going to die soon. We got to win right now.
whatever reason, if it's that or something else, there's more and more and more of a sense of urgency with the Falcons as that playoff drought continues to extend. There's more and more pressure kind of immediately. So I don't see, it's like the Steelers situation where you can mold this in whatever image you want. And I'm sure they'll give you the resources to do that, but will they give you the time to do that? I don't quite trust it, but it's not like one of these disaster organizations that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. Now, you talk about young quarterbacks, and that's why the next two openings on my list, right now I have Ravens, Giants, Falcons. The next team I would have on my list, and listen, a little bit of home cooking, whatever, but I do have the Tennessee Titans as the fourth best opening, and I think John Harbaugh having the Titans as his number 3 opportunity behind the Falcons and Giants kind of lends credence to that. There's been a lot of talk in the media about how the Titans are a legitimate threat for Harbaugh. I personally think that is agent work to get, leveraging the Titans to get more out of the Giants or the Falcons, who make more sense. But if you're the Titans, $100 million in cap space. A lot of people out there really liked Cam Ward and still really liked Cam Ward after what they saw. There's no state tax, which is obviously a huge difference from a place like the New York Giants. Look, the Titans roster is not as good as the teams that we just mentioned before, the Falcons, the Giants, the Ravens, the Steelers, but it's kind of a blank slate where you can build the roster the way that you want with Jeffrey Simmons, who's the best interior defensive lineman, and then Cam Ward and some young players from that, rookie class the Titans have done good with. It sounds like a lot of people are very high on the Titans' new general manager, Mike Borgonzi, who got hired last offseason. The problem is the ownership has been very impatient as of late. Now, I think that impatience from the Titans owner, Amy Adams Strunk, will result in more patience now because she simply can't be as impulsive as she has been over the last 3 years. But are you higher or lower on the Titans as an opening, with me having them as the fourth best?
I got them third, so I guess I'm higher, but we're not far. The only thing, much simpler point, I just believe in Cam Ward a lot. And I just think that's the reason I have the Titans above the Giants, is because I believe in Cam Ward more than I believe in Jackson Dart as a long-term option. I think Cam Ward has the goods, and I think over time things can build around him and metastasize a little bit. Like when you're going through Will Levis and you're going through all of these kind of QB disaster moments, it's really hard to keep, when you do get a talented player, it's really hard to kind of keep them in the building and to sort of have these things kind of stick to each other and build to each other. But when you have that QB in place and you say, okay, now who's the next, draft a first round receiver or something, and he works out, okay, now that's the pair. Now that's your Jackson Dart Malik Neighbors, right? And I think you can put a little bit more faith in that, but this very much is about my opinion on the QBs too, which I know not everybody will share.
Well, that makes it interesting to go to the next team, because I have the Las Vegas Raiders as the number 5th team here, and a lot of it has to do with Fernando Mendoza. He's going to be the top pick, and my guy Q Myers from Locked On Raiders thinks that Mendoza looks like a pretty good option.
I think Mendoza is the real deal, especially because he's got it between the ears, and I think that that's not talked about enough. I know I talk about it a lot, and I know people probably roll their eyes like, oh, yeah, so he's smart. No, it's something about what he does at the line of scrimmage. I think Tom Brady will appreciate that. He processes really well. He sees where blitzes are coming from. He's able to change at the line of scrimmage. I think he's a very sharp-minded quarterback, and that's going to go a long way as well. I think Mendoza would be the best quarterback the Raiders have had since 2016 Derek Carr. That's just my opinion.
I don't think that would be crazy to say whatsoever. And with Mendoza,
the highest bar.
Right, exactly. It's not that much to clear, but with Mendoza, if you really like Mendoza's tape, you get him as your number 1 quarterback. They do have Genty, they have Bowers, no state tax in Nevada. You have Max Crosby on the defensive side of the ball. It's somewhat of a blank slate as well, because there's a lot of changes that you could easily make for that team. And you do have Tom Brady, who the ownership has been bad in Las Vegas. A lot of people wouldn't look at Mark Davis as a great owner, but at the same time, Tom Brady kind of helps soothe that pain as he's in control now. But the real issue for the Raiders, to me, is the division is just so insane. Even if you like Mendoza, is he going to be better than Bo Nix? Is he going to be better than Justin Herbert? Is he going to be better than Mahomes when he comes back? So I have the Raiders at number 5. Would you have them higher or lower?
I have them dead last, Tyler.
Ooh, okay.
I have a lot of concerns with the Raiders. The division is a big one, right? It's really hard to be the guy when you can't win the division. I always look back at the AFC East in the 2000s and the 2010s. Plenty of perfectly fine coaches go in and out in 4 years because they could never win the division.
Yeah.
And you go, hey, you've been my coach for 5 years and we got nothing, no pennants to show for it, is a point, even though Tom Brady was in the division and that was why. And I feel the same about the AFC West. Huge for Sean Payton to get it this year. And I think a big ding for Jim Harbaugh not to, because I don't know when your next opportunity is going to be. So you're walking into that situation, but the thing for me is money. They've got a bunch of guys on staff, and I don't know what kind of money there is for them to offer you something competitive. So if you are deciding between the Raiders and another team that, like the Titans or the Giants, you're not getting the best offer from the Raiders. And if I'm trying to be a head coach, you're not going to pay me as much as those guys. That's part of my calculus for sure. But it also matters to what you're going to be able to do to build that. Yeah, it's a totally blank slate of a roster, but the one player you maybe wanted to build around in Max Crosby has 1 foot out the door.
True.
And I don't know what kind of money they're going to give you to offer big old signing bonuses. You're going to have to do these weird contracts with option bonuses and stuff like that. And it's really hard to work in free agency that way. It's really hard to keep players in the building when ownership isn't going to have the same cash to shell out, because they've got 60 different guys on their staff payroll that aren't part of this. The mismanagement really, really scares me. Tom Brady helps because Tom Brady has a reputation for being a competent person.
Right.
But running this business is a totally different thing than playing quarterback or announcing football games on Fox. It is a different, like, I would say Tom Brady is at best unproven, which is better than we get for everybody else in that ownership group. True. But I have so many concerns. I feel like I am walking into an Indiana Jones style dungeon if I'm going into the Raiders head coaching job.
I think that's fair, but for me, it's not. I'm not going to dispute what you're saying. It's just how I view the other openings and how much worse I think they are than what the Raiders present because of the blank slate nature and the number 1 pick and all of that. But absolutely fair to say that after you get past the Titans, that there is a tier down in terms of the exciting factor of the job. But let's talk about some of the jobs that I just don't think are very good openings at all. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time where a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. And that's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo. That's Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications, because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal, and it works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise, Quo is the number 1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. Once again, that's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're the number 1 rated meal service by others around, like, meal kits in terms of quality, convenience, value, taste, recipe ease. I mean, you could see why it's so easy. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, and quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and a free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Once again, that is Home Chef. All right, Luke, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Mike Tomlin being out in Pittsburgh. We're ranking the head coaching openings. Luke's talking about whether he has my ranks higher or lower. Been good discussion. But now we go into what I think is a lower tier. We talked about Pittsburgh. We don't need to relitigate that. But, Luke, I would have Pittsburgh next. I would have them as like the 6th best opening in the NFL because of, again, the QB, the aging roster, the experience. But you made great points about the organizational stability, somewhat of a blank slate to kind of do things the way that you want to do them. So the team that I would have after that, though, as we continue forward, is the Cleveland Browns. And I think that people in Cleveland maybe need to reset their expectations because it sounds like a lot of people, according to our guy Spencer German from Locked On Browns in Cleveland, want John Harbaugh.
I think he is the white whale of this cycle. He's the guy you want. He's the guy that I think can turn the Browns around and establish a culture here that you're looking for. You do whatever it takes to keep him in Cleveland and not let him leave that meeting. But if he does leave the meeting, you make sure he knows your best offers out there and that you're willing to go above and beyond to make sure he's your guy.
Listen, I'm sorry, but with the Browns, you have some picks. You can flip the narrative in Cleveland. That could go a long way. You could just change things, and that'll make you a cult hero. But it's the Browns, man. Their quarterback situation is a disaster. Their owner might be the worst in the entire NFL. They're obviously committed to Andrew Berry as a general manager, despite all of the bad things that he's been able to do, along with a lot of good stuff. He's a very mixed bag, and Andrew Berry, mixed berries, you could say. But I have the Browns there because it's just something that other people have never been able to overcome. And I personally think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. And if he couldn't get it done and do enough as two-time coach of the year, I mean, what could you possibly do to make Browns fans happy?
It is a Saw-style series of labyrinths and death traps in Cleveland.
Yes.
It's not unlike the Raiders to me, where you're walking into. There are so many different ways that you can just be kind of the next Mike Pettin, like
right. Who just retired, right? Didn't he just retire from the Vikings today, on Tuesday? So there you go.
Quietly a part of the higher ups of the Vikings. So that's actually somebody that they're gonna miss. But how are you not the next Rob Chudzinski here? It is the most impatient owner in the league. They do not have a situation that turns around this year. Unless you super believe in Shedeur Sanders.
The roster is bad.
The roster is bad, and it's going to take time to build that back up, and you have an owner without the patience to build that back up, which is why they have been what they have been for 15 years. Congratulations to Kevin Stefanski for getting him into the playoffs once or twice, but that is, to me, the shining example of how to ruin an NFL franchise is to be Jimmy Haslam and to have no patience. You've got people on that roster constantly from 4 plans ago, 4 different kinds of schemes ago. If you're Cleveland, I don't know. I think the only thing I could do is promote Jim Schwartz because at least he knows how to carve out his space in that organization. But the other thing is I'm super worried about is how are we losing power struggles to the guy that traded for Deshaun Watson? How are we losing political power struggles to Andrew Berry? What kind of Big Brother style nonsense am I going into where I'm going to have to pitch my case all the time against this guy that's going to hand me nonsense players all the time?
Yeah, how did the guy who made the worst trade in NFL history beat out a guy who's won Coach of the Year twice and got the Cleveland Browns
I think Stefanski
to the
got
playoffs
multiple?
Yes, he did. And that's why I'm high on Kevin Stefanski as an option. I think he's absolutely going to get a job. But the final 2 teams that I have here in my rankings, and they are another tier down for me because it's not with the Browns and the Raiders and the Titans. Things are bad in certain areas, but you can at least build that back up from somewhat of a clean slate. When you look at the Miami Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals, they're the bottom 2 for me because they have quarterback situations that not only need fixed, but you're going to have to go backwards before you can go forwards. They're going to have to eat dead cap money. They're going to have to trade away. They're going to have to be in tough spots. With Arizona, they have one of the worst owners in the NFL. They are not a prestige franchise whatsoever. And, it seems like they expect to be able to win sooner. They wanted to win this year with the Dolphins. The weather's nice. The owner is rich. You have some more pieces than maybe you have other places. But Tua's quarterback situation just absolutely clouds everything. So I would have the Dolphins over the Cardinals, but I have the Cardinals as the worst opening of them all.
I am not going to argue with you much about the Cardinals. That's another organization to me that reads like the Raiders or Browns, where you're walking into dysfunction and you're just going to be the next victim of it unless you slam dunk the QB pick or you find a way to, Tampa Bay Buccaneers get Tom Brady, to find a way to pull some coup like that. Like that. Otherwise, you are only take the job if you're 30 and you have forever to rehabilitate your image after this goes south. I do have the Dolphins a little bit higher, and the reason is just because there's a lot of talent that I believe in still on that roster. The Tua thing is a clearer picture to me than Kyler Murray. They're just done with him. He's on the roster, but they'll get rid of him. Like, it's over.
Right.
You are not taking Tua does not factor into your head coaching career with the Miami Dolphins at all. Except for the dead cap that he'll leave, I guess. But it's different than Kyler Murray, where it doesn't feel like there's a great sense of direction for where they want to go with that. If they want to hang out with that, what was this the infamous soft benching, or was he really that hurt? And do they want to stick with Murray? Do you want to stick with him? Do you believe in Kyler Murray? It's like year 8. Like, at a certain point, what do we want? What do we expect from him? And I feel like that's so much murkier. But I don't like any of these at all. And the only reason I have the Dolphins, what is this now? 5th on this list, 6th on this list. The only reason I have the Browns, Cardinals, and Raiders below them, because I just view those organizations as more dysfunctional than the Dolphins. Right. But don't mistake that for me saying I like Stephen Ross as an owner. I do think that he is a problem for the Dolphins, and they will get worse before they get better.
Yeah, these teams are definitely in different tiers. There's, gaps between certain teams, but that's a fair argument and hey, at the end of the day, you get to live on South Beach. And as a man who's been to Miami a few times, that ain't a bad spot. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Brain, Luke Braun. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.